In the next 6 months, you could completely change how you feel about your body, but not in the way most people on the internet are trying to sell you. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that almost nobody says clearly. Most of what you've seen about penis enlargement is either exaggerated, misunderstood, or flat out dangerous. And the real difference between something that might help you and something that can permanently damage you is much bigger than you think. The scary part? Most men don't even realize which side they're on. They're experimenting, guessing, trying things they saw in a late-night video or a random forum without actually understanding what's happening to their body. And when it goes wrong, it doesn't go a little wrong. It goes very wrong. So before we even talk about what could help, we need to clear something up first. Because if your expectations are built on myths, you're already heading in the wrong direction. There is no method, no pill, no exercise, no device that guarantees dramatic, permanent growth for everyone. That's the reality. What science does show is much more modest, much more gradual, and much more dependent on consistency, safety, and individual biology. We're talking about small changes, not transformations, and even those require patience, discipline, and realistic expectations. If someone promises fast, dramatic results, that's your first warning sign. Now here's where things get serious. Because while the quick fixes are tempting, they're also where the biggest risks live. Let's start with one of the most talked about options: surgery. On the surface, it sounds like a solution: permanent, medical, controlled. But the reality is more complicated. One common procedure involves cutting a structure that supports the penis internally. The idea is that by releasing it, more of the shaft becomes externally visible. But here's what often gets overlooked. This doesn't actually increase functional erect length in a meaningful way for most men. It mostly changes how it appears when flaccid. And at the same time, it can affect stability, which means during sex, the angle and support may not feel the same. Now think about that trade-off carefully, because you're not just changing appearance, you're potentially changing function. And any procedure involving nerves, blood vessels, and sensitive tissue carries risks. That's not fear-mongering. That's just biology. Now let's talk about another path people consider: injections. This usually involves adding material to increase girth. And yes, in some cases, it can create a temporary increase in size. But again, there are trade-offs. Some materials are absorbed by the body over time, meaning the effect fades. Others can lead to uneven distribution, lumps, or an unnatural shape. And in rare but serious cases, complications can occur if anything enters the bloodstream improperly. So while it might seem like a shortcut, it often becomes a cycle. Repeat treatments, maintenance, risk management, not exactly the simple fix it's made out to be. And then there's the category most people don't take seriously enough: unregulated methods, devices, exercises, or techniques that promise results without clear guidance. This is where a lot of injuries happen, because without proper knowledge, people push too hard, too fast, or too frequently. And the body responds, sometimes with pain, sometimes with reduced sensitivity, sometimes with issues that take months or longer to recover from. And here's the part that makes it worse. When something goes wrong, many people feel too uncomfortable to seek proper medical advice. So they ignore it or try to fix it themselves. And the situation gets worse. All of this leads to one simple but important point. If you're going to explore this topic, you need to prioritize safety over everything else. Not speed, not hype, not promises, safety, now. With that foundation in place, let's talk about what actually has some evidence behind it. Not miracles, not guarantees, just methods that have been studied and discussed in medical and scientific contexts. Two of the most commonly mentioned approaches involve gradual mechanical techniques. The idea is based on something called tissue adaptation. When certain tissues are exposed to consistent, controlled stress over time, they can adapt. This principle exists in other parts of the body too. But, and this is critical, it must be gradual, controlled, and done correctly. Not forced, not rushed. These approaches typically require consistency over months, not days, not weeks. And even then, results, if they occur, are usually modest. We're talking about small changes that may or may not be noticeable depending on the individual. That's the honest version, not the exaggerated version you usually hear. And this is where most people lose interest, because it's not exciting, it's not fast, it's not guaranteed, but it's also not reckless. And that's the trade-off. Now, there's another factor that often gets ignored completely, even though it plays a huge role: blood flow. Not in a gimmicky way, but in a foundational way. Because healthy circulation affects overall function, erection quality, tissue health, responsiveness, things that often matter more than size alone. And improving those areas doesn't require extreme methods. It comes down to general health, exercise, diet, sleep, stress management. Not flashy, but effective. And here's something worth thinking about. Many men focus so much on size that they completely overlook performance, connection, and confidence. But those are the things that actually shape real experiences, not numbers, not comparisons, not unrealistic standards created by media or the internet, real experiences. And when you shift your focus there, something interesting happens. The pressure decreases, confidence increases, and ironically, that often leads to better outcomes overall. Because confidence isn't built from chasing perfection. It's built from understanding reality and working with it. Now let's address something directly. If you're considering any method, whether it's a device, a supplement, or a procedure, the most important step is not buying it. It's understanding it, how it works, what the risks are, what the realistic outcomes are, and whether it actually aligns with your goals. Because once you separate facts from hype, your decisions become much clearer, and you stop chasing things that were never realistic to begin with. So here's where this leaves you. You have 3 paths. You can chase shortcuts and risk outcomes you can't control. You can explore slower, more cautious approaches with realistic expectations. Or you can decide that your focus belongs elsewhere entirely. None of those choices are wrong. But only one of them is informed, and that's the difference. Because this isn't just about physical change, it's about understanding your body, respecting it, and making decisions that don't compromise your long-term health for short-term curiosity. And if there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's this. There is no shortcut worth risking something you can't replace. So take your time, do your research, stay grounded in reality, and don't let curiosity turn into regret. Because the moment you start thinking long-term instead of chasing quick results, that's when you actually start making smarter decisions. And that alone already puts you ahead of most people.